Welcome to From Vision to Venture, the podcast for entrepreneurs, dreamers, and changemakers ready to turn ideas into thriving businesses. I'm Neville Solomon, and each week we'll explore the strategies, mindsets, and practical steps needed to start, grow, and scale successful ventures. Because every great business starts with a vision, and your journey starts right here.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, we know exactly why you're here.
Yeah, you want the signal, not the noise.
Right. You're driven to learn quickly and, you want to completely skip the fluff. And today we are delivering exactly that.
Definitely.
Because we're basically putting the modern business model under an X-ray machine.
And honestly, what we are going to find on that X-ray is, well, it's going to be incredibly confronting for a lot of people building companies right now.
Oh, absolutely. Think about a medical diagnosis, right? You break your arm, you go to the hospital, the doctor throws the X-ray on the light board, points to this, jagged white line and says, hey, there it is.
Right. It's binary. It's clean.
Exactly. It's clean. But when you step into the world of commerce specifically, if you're looking at an SMME, a small, medium, or micro enterprise, that X-ray machine usually just doesn't work.
No, not at all.
We're operating in a diagnostic landscape that is completely murky. The pain a founder feels almost never points directly to the actual disease.
It's like the classic misdirection of the human nervous system, but applied to economics.
Yeah.
Like the patient comes into the ER screaming about a blinding headache, right? But the physiological problem is actually a failing kidney.
Wow, yeah.
And if the doctor just prescribes painkillers, well, the patient feels better for a few hours, but the organ just continues to fail.
Which brings us to the core mission today for you listening.
Yeah.
We are dismantling this pervasive, incredibly dangerous misconception that honestly destroys thousands of businesses every year.
Thousands, easily.
Yeah, so if you are a founder or if you work in an SMME or, if you just obsess over the mechanics of how value is actually sustained in the real world, this is entirely for you.
We're going right to the root of it.
Right to the root of that anxiety that wakes entrepreneurs up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I want to anchor us immediately with a provocation that sits at the center of the research we're unpacking today, from the vision to venture source material.
It's a heavy one.
It hits like a ton of bricks. Quote, if your business can't survive 30 days without your personal income, you don't have a cash flow problem. You have a business model problem.
That just completely reorients the conversation right there.
Totally.
Think about how many founders are out there right now, just running themselves into the ground.
Yeah.
Constantly chasing investors, applying for another line of credit, sweating over the Friday payroll.
Every single week.
Right. And they do this because they operate under this assumption that, well, if they just had a little more cash, the turbulence would smooth out.
Right. They just need that next bump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this framework argues that by focusing on the cash flow, they are completely, fundamentally misdiagnosing their own financial anxiety.
They're basically treating the headache and ignoring the kidney.
Yes, exactly.
So let's look at the psychology here. Because if you talk to literally any stressed business owner, the first words out of their mouth are, oh, we're dealing with a cash flow crunch. Nobody ever says, hey, I have a fundamental structural flaw in how my business creates and captures value.
No one has ever said that in the history of business.
Right. So why is the lack of cash always the immediate scapegoat?
Because the pain is immediate. Cash flow is the very first thing an operator notices because it triggers a literal survival response.
Like a physical response.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the visceral sensations of running a company. Salaries are due on a specific Friday at 5 p.m. The landlord demands the rent on the first of the month. And frankly, they don't care about your pipeline.
They don't care if a big deal is closing next week.
Right. Your suppliers are sending you urgent emails like holding up raw materials until an invoice is cleared.
Right. The bank account balance is just this single, undeniable integer. It's either enough or it isn't.
Exactly. And when that integer drops too low, the brain's threat detection system just takes over. You go straight into fight or flight. And in that state of neurological panic, it is incredibly easy for even the most analytical, brilliant people to conclude that the lack of cash is the problem. It's the most visible crisis.
Sure.
But the reality is that cash flow is just an indicator. It's literally the check engine light flashing on your dashboard.
And smashing the plastic light on your dashboard with a hammer doesn't fix the transmission.
It definitely doesn't.
So let's make this even more tangible. The research we're looking at uses a really compelling analogy. It asks us to visualize a business as a water tank.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, the cash flow is simply the water level inside that tank. So if the water level is dropping rapidly, the founder panics. But wait, I have to stop you there, because if I put myself in the shoes of a desperate founder, my instinct isn't to, redesign the tank. My instinct is survival.
Sure, get more water.
Right. Hooking up a massive high-pressure hose like a huge business loan or a massive round of venture capital that solves the immediate problem of payroll, the tank fills back up, people get paid. Why isn't that a valid survival tactic?
Because you are subsidizing inefficiency, and that subsidy has an expiration date.
Oh, untack that.
So if we stick with the tank, right, imagine that the tank is riddled with structural holes. If you hook up a massive hose of venture capital, yeah, sure, the water level rises. You feel profound, immediate relief.
You can finally breathe again.
You can breathe, right. But those structural holes, the underlying economics of the business, they haven't changed at all. That new money simply leaks out into the soil.
Ah, I see.
And worse, honestly, because you hooked up a high-pressure hose, the sheer volume and force of that capital might actually widen those holes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you accelerate your own burn rate.
So you basically just give the water a faster way to leave.
Precisely. And eventually, the hose gets turned off, the bank refuses the next loan, the venture capitalists stop returning your calls because the market tightens.
Right.
And when that hose disconnects, you're left with an empty tank that is vastly more damaged than when you started.
That is terrifying. Okay, so let's get incredibly specific about what those holes actually look like in the real world. Because we aren't just talking about abstract inefficiencies. We are talking about concrete mechanical failures in the business model.
Exactly.
Let's say I'm running a mid-sized B2B software consultancy. Okay. We do custom builds for logistics companies. We have 20 employees. What is the first structural hole that is silently draining my tank?
The most common and probably the most devastating hole is the combination of weak customer demand paired with low margins.
Okay, break that down for my hypothetical consultancy.
So weak demand doesn't necessarily mean nobody wants your service. It means you have to push a boulder uphill to close a single deal.
Like it's just exhausting.
Exactly. You are spending massive amounts of time, energy, and, your marketing budget just to convince one logistics company to hire you.
So that friction is expensive.
Very. It drains the tank before you've even written a line of code.
And then let's say you finally close the deal, right? But if I'm suffering from low margins, what happens next?
Well, a margin is simply what's left over after you subtract the direct costs of delivering your service from the price you charge for it. So you fought tooth and nail to win a $100,000 custom software contract.
Huge win. We ring the bell.
Right, you ring the bell. But because your margins are low, paying your developers, your project managers, and the server costs, that eats up $95,000 of that contract.
Oh. So I just burn a massive amount of calories, stress my entire team out for 6 months, and all I have to show for it's $5,000.
Exactly. You are burning calories to earn crumbs.
Wow.
And when your margins are that thin, every transaction barely covers its own footprint. It contributes almost nothing to the overall health and growth of the tank.
So there's no buffer at all?
None.
Yeah.
One unexpected delay, or one client who demands a revision, and that $5,000 profit instantly becomes a $10,000 loss. You are operating on an economic knife's edge.
Which naturally brings up the issue of pricing. Because, if my margins are that low, the obvious answer is just to charge more, right?
You think so, yeah.
But there is a massive fear associated with that. And this introduces the next structural failure from the text. Poor pricing interacting with high operating costs. Why are founders so terrified to just fix the price tag?
It is entirely driven by fear of abandonment.
Really?
Yeah. When you already have weak demand, you are terrified that if you charge what the service is actually worth, you will lose the few prospects you actually have.
So you just cave.
Yeah, founders artificially lower the price just to win the deal. And they convince themselves they are being competitive.
Right, we're pricing to win.
Exactly. But what they're actually doing is subsidizing the client's business with their own future stress. You are literally paying for the privilege of working for them.
And when you layer high operating costs on top of that fear-based pricing, it's game over. Operating costs, that's your rent, your admin salaries, your software subscriptions, legal fees.
Everything you have to pay just to keep the lights on.
Right? These are the fixed costs that sit there staring at you, whether you sell 10 contracts or 0.
And if your pricing is suppressed and your fixed overhead is bloated, The water isn't just leaking out the sides of the tank. The entire bottom has dropped out.
Wow.
You are bleeding cash simply by existing. Every day the sun comes up, you owe money, and your sales aren't priced high enough to ever outpace that baseline bleed.
Okay, I want to introduce an analogy here because the next two mechanical failures, slow-paying clients and a lack of recurring revenue, they deal with the actual timeline of money.
Right, the velocity of it.
Yes. Think about a restaurant kitchen using a ticket system. You buy all the fresh ingredients on Monday, you prep on Tuesday. A customer comes in on Wednesday, orders a massive steak dinner, eats it, and leaves.
Okay.
But instead of paying the bill on the way out, they say, hey, I'll settle this in 60 to 90 days.
Which would be insane in a restaurant.
Completely insane, because the kitchen still has to buy groceries on Thursday for the next customer, and the chef still needs to be paid on Friday.
That is the perfect illustration of a strained cash conversion cycle. Slow-paying clients are basically treating your business like a free, short-term, zero-interest bank loan.
Yeah, they get all the value up front.
Exactly. You've already expended the resources, your team did the work, you delivered the value, but the cash, the water doesn't flow back into your tank for 3 months.
And during that massive gap, your own obligations just don't pause.
The landlord doesn't care that your client is dragging their feet.
No.
Right. And this creates a severe, entirely artificial cash flow crisis. The business might actually look profitable on a spreadsheet, but the actual cash is trapped in limbo.
Ah, I see.
And if we compound that with a lack of recurring revenue, it just becomes unbearable.
Right, because if you don't have subscriptions or retainers or highly reliable repeat purchases.
That means every single dollar of revenue requires a brand new sales hunt. There's no baseline of water naturally trickling into the tank to offset that constant daily drain.
You're starting from scratch every single time, and that lack of predictability leads directly to the last hole, an inconsistent sales pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
If you have no idea where your next meal is coming from, you live in a perpetual cycle of feast or famine. I mean, how can you confidently tell a slow-paying client to pay up or get out if you don't have 3 more clients waiting in the wings?
You can't.
Yeah.
You just can't. That inconsistency breeds desperation, and desperation makes you blind to strategy.
Because you're just surviving.
Exactly. When your pipeline is completely dry, you stop optimizing your business model. You stop thinking about margins or ideal customer profiles. You just panic about getting any cash from anyone at any price just to survive the week.
So if the tank is leaking, the natural instinct is to grab a bucket and start bailing. And for an entrepreneur, bailing water usually means dipping into their own pocket.
Yes, the founder trap.
Right. This is one of the most critical diagnostic checks we need to explore. Let's talk about the first warning sign from the text. The phenomenon of the founder constantly funding the business themselves, the so-called salary sacrifice.
This is an incredibly insidious trap, primarily because, honestly, we have heavily romanticized it in our business culture.
Yeah, we really have.
It masquerades as passion or dedication or grit. The founder looks at the payroll account on Wednesday, realizes they are short, and quietly decides, you know what, I just won't take my salary this month. I'll leave it in the business.
Or they transfer personal savings to cover a vendor.
Right.
But wait, every founder story we idolize, like the whole Silicon Valley mythos, it involves someone eating ramen, maxing out personal credit cards, and sleeping under their desk. Isn't that just the necessary price of entry for building something great?
That is the narrative for the ideation phase.
Ah, okay.
That is totally acceptable for the first 6 months in a garage when you're just trying to prove a concept. It is absolute dysfunction in year 3 of an operating enterprise.
Year 3, yeah, that's different.
Founders rationalize it, though. They say, oh, I'm just investing in my baby. But a business is not a baby. It is an economic engine.
That is a stark distinction. So what does a healthy engine look like structurally?
A healthy business must eventually achieve financial independence.
And what does that mean mechanically?
What that means, in hard mechanical terms, is that the business generates enough intrinsic value from its own operations to cover all its expenses, including paying the founder a competitive market rate salary for the actual labor they are providing.
Right.
And it still has profit left over to reinvest. If it requires a constant IV drip of the founder's personal wealth just to tread water, it isn't an independent entity.
It's acting like a parasite.
It is a literal parasite on the founder's personal life. You aren't running a business, you are funding a very expensive, highly stressful hobby that is actively destroying your personal net worth.
Man, that is tough to hear, but so true. Let's look at another diagnostic check, Warning sign number 2, which completely flies in the face of conventional wisdom.
Oh, the growth trap.
Yes, because we are conditioned by society, by media, by every business book out there to applaud growth. Growth is the holy grail. But when we look at the mechanics of a failing business model, we see a terrifying reality. Sales that do not produce profit.
Revenue without profit, yeah.
I really want to unpack this because surely if a business doubles its customer base, isn't that inherently a massive win?
It might mean the market wants what you are selling, sure. But it absolutely does not mean your business is built to survive the act of providing it.
Wait, survive providing it?
Yeah, this is where we have to dismantle the myth that all growth is good growth. If every new sale creates more work and more complexity without producing a healthy margin, growth doesn't make you stronger. Growth accelerates your collapse.
Okay, you have to explain the math on that. How does doubling your revenue make you more likely to go bankrupt?
All right, let's go back to your software consultancy. You have those razor-thin margins, right? You make just enough on each $100,000 contract to cover the direct labor, but practically nothing drops down to cover your rent, your admin staff, or your profit.
Right, the $5,000 leftover scenario.
Exactly.
Ah.
Now, you hire an aggressive sales team, and you double your client roster. You go from 10 clients to 20. You celebrate. You ring a bell in the office.
Everyone claps.
Yeah.
Champagne is popped.
Right. But what actually happens behind the scenes? To service 10 new clients, you have to hire twice as many developers.
Okay.
Your management overhead skyrockets because managing 20 clients requires significantly more coordination than 10.
That makes sense.
You have to upgrade your server infrastructure. You need a bigger office. Your expenses scale linearly and sometimes exponentially with your customer count.
Wow.
And because there is no healthy margin baked into the foundational model, doubling your revenue just means you're managing twice as much chaos, taking on twice as much liability, and at the end of the month, you still have zero profit.
You are basically just taking a flawed blueprint and building a much larger, much heavier building on top of a crumbling foundation.
Exactly. You scale the flaw. Revenue without profit is just subsidized busyness. The business model, specifically your margin architecture, is what dictates whether growth acts as a catalyst for sustainable wealth or a catalyst for a nervous breakdown.
And speaking of a nervous breakdown, this financial stress bleeds directly into the founder's time, energy, and physical health. Because if the margins are terrible, you have to work 80 hours a week just to keep the lights on.
Yeah, you become trapped in it.
Which brings us to warning sign number 3, a diagnostic test that I think every listener should apply to their own professional life immediately. It's the 30-day holiday test.
This is a brutal one.
It really is. What happens to the revenue if you, the founder, simply stop working for a month?
That question operates as a very harsh mirror.
Yeah.
Most SMME owners do not like what reflects back at them when they answer it. Because the honest answer is usually complete operational paralysis. If they left for 30 days, didn't open their laptop, and didn't answer their phone, the entire operation would grind to a halt within a week.
Wow.
Proposals wouldn't go out, fires wouldn't be put out, and cash would just stop flowing.
Let's really paint the picture of what that means structurally, because people use the words freelancer, founder, and business owner completely interchangeably.
They do, yeah.
But there is a massive chasm between being a vital part of a machine and being the only engine of that machine.
It is the fundamental difference between being a bricklayer and being an architect.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if the revenue of your company is directly, linearly tied to your personal exertion of physical or mental energy, you have not built a scalable business. You've built yourself a job.
You are the bricklayer.
You are the bricklayer. The house only gets built when your hands are on the bricks. If you get the flu, the income stops. That is a structurally fragile, high-risk scenario.
Whereas an architect designs the system.
It's exactly. A standalone business is a machine designed to create value independently of the founder's daily, minute-by-minute labor. The architect designs a machine. They might tinker with the gears, they might dictate the strategy, but the machine has its own momentum.
It runs without them.
Right. It relies on standard operating procedures, delegated responsibilities, robust systems. It functions whether the founder is at their desk in New York or sitting on a beach in Mexico. If your business model requires your constant, unyielding intervention in every single transaction, it is broken.
And that fragility leads directly to the next warning sign, number 4. The exhaustion of the monthly reset, meaning every month starts at 0.
It's grueling.
The psychological toll of waking up on the first of the month, looking at the spreadsheet and seeing a big fat 0, you have to hunt and kill your dinner every single day, all over again just to cover the massive overhead you've accumulated. It's an endless survival exercise.
And we really have to recognize how the human nervous system interprets a survival exercise.
How does it?
It interprets it as an existential threat. When every month is a scramble from zero to just barely enough, the founder exists in a state of chronic cortisol elevation.
Just constant stress.
Constant. And you don't have the luxury of thinking strategically about your business model when you're drowning. You take bad clients who abuse your staff. You heavily discount your prices just to get a signature today. You compromise your margins.
All to get a little bit of water in the tank before Friday.
Which creates a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. The panic decisions you make to survive the cash flow crunch this month further entrench the structural flaws for next month.
Okay, let's synthesize this because it is a bleak picture. The founder is exhausted. They're funding the business from their own savings. They're generating revenue, but absolutely no profit, entirely unable to take a vacation and starting every month in a panic.
A recipe for burnout.
When an entrepreneur is backed into this corner, what is their natural reflex? They look outside for a savior. They try to raise capital. And this is warning sign number 5. You're solving the wrong problem.
Yes. This is the culmination of the cash flow mirage. Founders will spend months polishing pitch decks, flying to meetings, and begging banks for lines of credit.
Because they think it'll fix everything.
Right. They believe that an investor's check is the ultimate validation that will finally save them.
But pouring capital into a fundamentally broken economic model is like throwing premium gasoline onto a wet log. I mean, it flashes bright for a second, and then you're just left with the same cold, wet wood. Why is outside capital not the cure?
Let's go back to the core mechanics. If your margins are negative, if your pricing is purely fear-based, if you have zero recurring revenue and a high customer acquisition cost, venture capital does not magically rewrite the laws of mathematics.
Right.
It simply gives you a larger runway to burn through. You are renting time, and usually you are renting it at an exorbitant cost, either through high-interest debt or by giving away a massive chunk of equity in your own life's work.
And the really insidious part is that the presence of that artificial cash masks the urgency of the actual disease.
Exactly. The founder logs into the bank account, sees $2 million sitting there from a seed round, and suddenly the pressure is gone.
Oh, we're saved.
Right. So they delay making the brutal, necessary structural changes. They keep subsidizing weak demand with expensive marketing. They keep overpaying for bloated operations. They mask the broken engine with a shiny new paint job.
Until the funding runs dry.
Yes. And when it does, the underlying economics are almost always in worse shape than when they started because, like we said earlier, the company has scaled its flaws, the holes are larger, the pressure is higher, and the collapse is much more spectacular.
All right, I want to pivot up from the diagnosis to the cure. If you are listening to this and you recognize your own operation in these warning signs, your stomach is probably in knots right now.
Yes, a lot to take in.
But we aren't just here to admire the problem. If treating the symptom of cash flow is a trap, and if outside funding isn't the immediate answer, how do we actually repair the underlying economics? How do we rebuild the machine so it can stand on its own?
We need to operationalize the repair. This isn't about, vague motivational advice. It's about a concrete blueprint of countermeasures that directly target the mechanical failures we've identified.
Let's walk through this 6-step framework from the text and really dig into the how. The foundation of this repair starts with steps 1 and 2. Knowing the ideal customer and solving a meaningful problem.
Yep, that's where it all begins.
Now, I know that sounds like a slide from a Startup 101 presentation. Everyone says, oh, know your customer. But mechanically, why is this the absolute first step in fixing a cash flow crisis?
Because it's the only way to patch the hole of weak demand. Think about how most struggling SMMEs operate. They are desperate for revenue, so they act like a Swiss Army knife. They try to be everything to everyone.
They cast this massive generic net.
Precisely. And which means they are spending money marketing to people who have absolutely no intention of ever buying.
So it's just wasted capital.
It's completely wasted. If you are marketing to everyone, you are relevant to no one. Your messaging is watered down. You are burning cash on broad advertising that doesn't convert. But if you deeply surgically define your ideal customer.
Like really define them.
Yeah, if you know exactly what keeps them up at night, what industry they are in, and what specific pain they are experiencing, you can concentrate all of your resources on them.
And you have to actually solve a meaningful problem for them.
Right, because if your product is a nice to have, just a slight convenience, you will always struggle to generate demand. You will always have to aggressively sell it.
You're always pushing the boulder.
Exactly. But if you solve a must-have agonizing problem, the dynamic flips. The market begins to pull the product from you. When demand is organic, your cost to acquire a customer plummets, which immediately improves the water level in your tank.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so once you've validated that urgent demand, you have to capture the value. This brings us to step 3, pricing for value and profitability.
This is huge.
How does a founder actually execute this shift in the real world? How do you move from fear-based pricing to value-based pricing without just, losing your nerve?
It requires a fundamental shift in how you view your own product.
Okay, how so?
Most struggling businesses use cost plus pricing. They look at a spreadsheet, figure out it costs them $50 to manufacture a widget or deliver an hour of service. They slap a 10% markup on it and charge $55.
Right. Standard practice.
But they are pricing based on their own internal limitations.
So what is value-based pricing then?
Value-based pricing completely ignores your internal costs. It looks entirely at the economic impact you are having on the client.
Oh, I see.
Let's go back to your software. Let's say you built a piece of inventory software. It costs you $100 a month to host it. But that software prevents a logistics company from losing $50,000 a month in spoiled goods.
Wow, okay.
If you use cost plus pricing, you might charge them $150. You are capturing none of the value you actually created.
You are leaving massive amounts of money on the table.
Exactly. If you are saving them $50,000, you should be charging them $5,000 or $10,000 a month.
Which they would gladly pay.
Gladly.
Yeah.
It's still a massive win for them. But now, you have built profound, healthy margins into the transaction. When you price for the value of the outcome, every single sale actively fortifies the health of your business. You fix the margin hole instantly.
Okay, so you have the right customer, and you are charging a highly profitable price. Now you have to actually sell it, predictably. The 4th step is building a repeatable sales process. This is about eliminating the feast or famine pipeline and the monthly survival exercise.
Yes, getting off the roller coaster.
Right. How do we remove the founder's sheer charisma from the equation?
Well, a founder-led sales process is just unscalable. In the beginning, sure, the founder closes deals because of sheer passion, industry connections, and brute force. But you can't teach brute force to a new hire. A repeatable sales process means you have engineered a predictable machine. You know exactly what your funnel looks like.
Let's define that funnel mechanically for the listener.
Okay, it means you have data that proves if you spend $1,000 on targeted LinkedIn ads, you will get 100 leads.
Okay.
Of those 100 leads, your automated email sequence will book 10 discovery calls.
Got it.
And of those 10 calls, your sales script, which is documented and tested, will close 2 deals. You now have a mathematical certainty that X amount of input equals Y amount of highly profitable revenue.
It basically becomes an equation rather than a roll of the dice.
And that predictability is the ultimate stress reliever. You escape the survival exercise because you can finally forecast your cash flow. You aren't hoping for rain, you control the irrigation system.
And once that system is in place, you achieve the holy grail, step 5. You can systematize operations to reduce founder dependency. This is how you pass the 30-day holiday test. This is how you transition from being the bricklayer to being the architect.
Yes, you document every process. The repeatable sales funnel is written down. The fulfillment process has standard operating procedures. The customer onboarding is automated.
You literally build yourself out of the job.
You deliberately and systematically engineer yourself out of being the daily bottleneck. You empower your staff with decision-making frameworks so they don't have to knock on your door every time a minor issue arises.
Right.
When the business can operate systematically without your unyielding intervention, it ceases to be a high-stress job and transforms into a scalable, standalone asset.
I love how sequential this is. You can't systematize a broken, unprofitable process. You have to fix the demand, fix the pricing, build a repeatable funnel, and then you systematize it.
Exactly. It has to be in order.
And to ensure that machine stays healthy, step 6, you have to monitor the actual vital signs. This brings us to the key financial indicators. The blueprint highlights 4 specific metrics from the text that founders must obsess over, and we really need to unpack why these matter so much more than just gross revenue.
They are the actual pulse of the business.
Right. So the first 2 are gross margin and operating expenses.
And these 2 must be monitored in tandem. We've heavily discussed gross margin. That is the absolute requirement that every unit sold or every service hour delivered actually retains a healthy profit after direct costs.
But you have to protect that margin from your operating expenses, your OPEX.
Because overhead creep is a silent killer.
Oh, it's so easy to let overhead creep up.
It really is. You hire an extra administrative assistant you don't strictly need. You upgrade to the premium tier of a software suite you only use 10% of. You rent a slightly nicer office to impress clients.
And suddenly you're drowning again.
Right. If your fixed OPEX grows faster than your gross margin, you are actively redigging the hole in your tank. You have to keep a ruthless, tight leash on overhead.
The third metric is customer acquisition cost, or CAC. I want to use an analogy here. Think of your business as a commercial fishing boat. The CAC is the cost of the diesel fuel required to sail out and catch one single fish.
Okay, I like this.
If it cost you $50 in fuel to catch a fish that you could only sell for $30 at the market, the more fish you catch, the faster you go bankrupt.
That is brilliant, and it's exactly how CAC functions. CAC is your total sales and marketing expenditure divided by the number of new customers acquired in that period.
It tells you, to the penny, how much it costs to buy a customer.
Exactly. If your CAC is higher than the lifetime profit value of that customer, your business model is mathematically designed to fail. Monitoring CAC ensures that the repeatable sales process you built remains highly efficient over time.
And finally, we return to the timeline of money, the cash conversion cycle. I mean, this sounds like an intimidating accounting term, but it is deeply practical.
It is simply a measurement of speed. How many days does it take for a dollar you invest into your business, say buying raw materials or paying a developer to travel through your system and come back to you as cash from a paying customer?
Right.
If you pay your suppliers on day 1, but your client's invoice isn't paid until day 60, you have a 60-day valley of death. Your cash is frozen.
So how do you actually optimize that in the real world?
By aggressively restructuring your agreements. You negotiate 60-day payment terms with your suppliers so you don't have to pay them immediately.
Okay.
And simultaneously, you require upfront deposits or 15-day payment terms from your clients. You compress the timeline. By fixing the cash conversion cycle, you permanently eliminate the slow-paying client's hole.
It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
Improving these 4 specific metrics, margin, OPEX, CAC, and the conversion cycle, is what actually strengthens the structural integrity of the business model.
Okay, so we have the diagnostic tools, we have analyze the structural failures, and we have a concrete blueprint for repair. But how does an overwhelmed entrepreneur actually begin this massive shift? Like, how do you operationalize this transition from daily panic to long-term predictability?
This is where we look at the methodology called the Tikvah Pathways approach, which is heavily featured in the source text. Their core observation is incredibly clarifying.
Yeah.
They argue that when an entrepreneur is drowning, they don't need an infusion of cash first. They need an infusion of clarity.
Clarity over cash. Throwing cash at confusion just scales the confusion.
Exactly. The Tikvah Pathways approach utilizes a startup readiness framework. It is designed to force the founder to stop bailing water and finally look at the actual blueprint of the tank.
To step back and assess.
Right. It guides them to systematically validate their market, proving that their ideal customer actually exists and is willing to pay. It forces them to refine their value proposition, which gives them the courage to command premium pricing. And it helps them architect that repeatable sales strategy.
It is really about changing the ultimate objective of the enterprise. I mean, the tragedy of operating with a cash flow problem mindset is that it reduces your entire ambition to mere survival.
Yes.
You just want to make it to Friday. But the true goal, the definition of success in this framework, is to build a machine that consistently generates intense value for the customer and sustainable compounding returns for the founder.
And sustainable returns imply a long-term horizon. It implies a structural resilience that allows the business to weather economic downturns, market shifts, and yes, even a 30-day vacation by the founder.
Right.
It is the exact opposite of the zero-sum game of monthly survival.
And there is a highly actionable next step here from the source. The approach recommends taking a structured startup readiness assessment.
I highly recommend doing this.
The entire point of an assessment like this is to identify the specific gaps, the unique holes in your specific water tank that are holding your operation back. It gives founders a diagnostic roadmap to move from mere survival to actual, impenetrable structural resilience.
It's basically an invitation to stop guessing, to stop treating the symptoms, to look past the flashing cash flow light, open the hood, and finally examine the mechanics of the engine.
Which brings us to the synthesis of everything we've unpacked today, and I want to speak directly to you, the listener. If you are feeling that recurring, suffocating pressure of cash flow, Do not ignore it. But more importantly, do not misdiagnose it.
Don't just blame the cat.
Right. That pressure is not a request for a bigger loan. It is not a sign that you just need to work harder. It is your business begging you to strengthen its underlying economic model.
Yes.
It is screaming at you to fix your margins, command your pricing, and build a system that doesn't rely entirely on your physical exhaustion.
We have to return to that powerful central provocation to close this out. Don't just build a business that makes money. Build one that can stand on its own.
Build one that can stand on its own. That is the ultimate metric of success. Now, before we sign off, I want to pull back the lens a bit. When we look at the macro trends in the global economy through the filter of this cash flow versus business model dynamic, what is a final provocative thought we need to chew on?
Well, we spent a lot of time analyzing the 30-day holiday test, the realization that if the business stops when you stop, you haven't built a scalable enterprise, you've built a fragile job.
Right.
But if we zoom out and look at the cultural narrative of modern work, think about the massive celebrated rise of the gig economy.
For sure.
Think about the freelance revolution and the solo creator movement that is just so heavily promoted across every social media platform today.
The entire business of one phenomenon.
Exactly. Millions of people are leaving traditional employment to start these solo businesses. But based on the rigorous mechanical definitions we've established today, are these actually standalone businesses?
Wow, that's a good point.
Or are millions of people actively being encouraged to build inherently leaky water tanks, completely devoid of structural resilience, just masquerading as enterprises?
Honestly, it's probably the latter for most.
Are we, as a culture, actively celebrating the creation of a massive generation of founders who are structurally trapped in the cash flow illusion, entirely dependent on their own daily labor, and destined to fail the 30-day test for the rest of their lives?
Wow. That is an incredibly heavy, profoundly necessary question. Are we romanticizing the creation of millions of unscalable, high-stress jobs under the glossy guise of entrepreneurship? That is something you absolutely must mull over as you evaluate your own professional life, the platforms you build on, and the models you rely on.
Thank you for joining me on From Vision to Venture. Remember, successful businesses aren't built overnight. They're built through clarity, consistency, and the courage to take the next step. Every entrepreneur starts with a vision, but it's intentional action that turns that vision into a venture.